Hello, my name is Robert O'Shea, and today I'll be presenting a 1 hour introductory lesson on Elizabeth Bishop's poem First Death in Nova Scotia to 50 or higher level students as a part of the Leaving Certificate curriculum. The reason I chose this topic is because poetry makes up such a large part of the Leaving Certificate curriculum. Students must study 48 poems in total. That's 6 poems from 8 different poets, resulting in a vast amount of poetry to be covered. Poetry is a very complex topic, which I found difficult in secondary school, but with the help of my teacher, I was able to enjoy it regardless of its difficulty. Poetry is vital in the development and progression of language and the use of it through understanding. Um, it's important to ensure that students understand this topic because it's extremely complex. The learning intentions of this lesson is for students to be able to clearly identify different poetic devices and features of the poem, which is vital as part of the topic of poetry in the Leaving Certificate. Students will also critically analyse the poem and obtain a better understanding of it and the different key quotes and imagery used in the poem. These learning intentions can be applied throughout the topic of poetry in general, throughout the Leaving Certificate, and they are important in developing key skills for students to be used in other subjects. Students will also have prior knowledge of this topic from the junior cycle study of poetry, which includes poetic devices and features of poetry. Students will also have basic knowledge of themes from poems studied in the junior cycle. Asking questions about poems students have studied in the junior cycle and if they can recall any themes or imagery used in the poems might help in engaging the students in the lesson and the further learning intentions. This will also bring in key skills from the junior certificate cycle and will create continuity of learning and the further development of these key skills. Students may find it difficult to comprehend the language used in the poem and the large amount of information in such a small text and such a small number of words. This may make it more difficult to deconstruct the poem in order to identify themes and other devices, as well as what the poem is really about. Poetry is more difficult for some than it is for others, so those who are less interested in the topic may find it harder to grasp different concepts. To begin the lesson, I would display the poem as well as a picture of Bishop on the interactive whiteboard in order for the students to connect a face to a name, as well as to keep the students interested and engaged in the lesson, and to engage visual as well as text orientated learners in the lesson. I would then talk a bit about Bishop and her life and about her influences. This will give the students an opportunity to think about the kind of person she was. I'd also recap on some literary devices such as hyperbole, onomatopoeia, and so on to refresh the class's memory on them and what they are. Following this, I would read the poem for the class aloud and ask the students to make note of any features they may see, such as themes, and what feelings they get from the poem. After this, I would give the students allocated time to work in groups and identify different themes, moods, and images, and so on, that they may see in the poem. This would assist students of all levels because information is being passed around and students of lower levels are mixing with students of higher levels. And this makes the lesson easier to understand for all students. Using the strategy of reciprocal teaching, I would engage with students in classroom conversation and discuss their findings and ask questions and listen to their answers and develop on them. The lesson, I would ensure that the students have a clear understanding of what was covered in the class by encouraging them to ask questions on anything they didn't completely understand and explain clearly anything not understood by the students to the best of my ability. I would recap what was covered in the lesson and reinforce what was spoken about in the class, and I would then assign an activity for homework such as where in the poem the theme is most apparent. One of the main strategies I would use for teaching this topic is dialogic teaching. Discussion between the teacher and the class is essential for keeping students interested and engaged in the class and to discuss and develop on ideas given by the students. As well as this, using photos as well as texts helps to keep both visual and text orientated learners interested and make it easier for them to grasp concepts of the poem. Think, pair, and share is also a very useful strategy which keeps students interested, as well as question and answer sessions, all through the strategy of active learning. The key skills of the students will be further developed throughout this lesson. As previously mentioned, the junior cycle key skills will be interpreted into this lesson in order to create continuity of learning and allow students to interpret and control the textual features of written and oral language to express and communicate more effectively. Students will also develop their skills in critically analysing texts, as well as communicating with one another and managing information more effectively. Some difficulties and challenges may appear during this lesson. One of these could be that some of the students may become less interested in the topic over the duration of the class. A way to counteract this would be trying to get students to relate something in their own lives to the poem, in order to feel like they're more engaged with the class and have more interest in the poetry. It's also known that poetry holds a large amount of information in such a small amount of words, so using group work would be a fantastic and effective way in counteracting this to evenly spread the workload between all the students, and after that coming back and discussing it as a class. Identifying different themes in poetry in the Leaving Cert cycle, and particularly in First Death in Nova Scotia, could be difficult for the students. A way to counteract this would be to ask for any words that crop up in the students' minds as they're reading the poem, which would be their first initial feeling they get when they read the poem. There are a number of cross-curricular links which could be made with other subject disciplines that come from this topic. The effective critical analysis of texts for context can be used in almost every other subject in order to develop better understanding of the subject, particularly in history and geography, which can often be quite text-heavy in some lessons. The use of music can also be linked to the subject of music in creating an atmosphere through music. And very importantly, the correct grammar, punctuation, and syntax can be used across all other subjects and can develop the student's key skills. In conclusion, poetry is an extremely complex topic which contains a lot of information in a small amount of text which requires thorough analysis to identify different poetic devices and features and to discover the true meaning of the poem. Prior knowledge from the junior cycle that the students have will be applied in order to analyse the poem, and these key skills from the junior cycle will be further developed, and this in turn will create continuity of learning. Students might find it difficult to identify some poetic features and concepts and to grasp some concepts of the poem. Group work can help to spread the workload and the amount of information contained in one poem, and this group work will be able to allow students of different levels to mix together to make the lesson easier for them, for one another. Classroom discussion through dialogic teaching will keep the students interested by creating a constant active learning environment, and will help them stay engaged. English definitely holds essential skills and is the foundation of the languages used in almost all other subjects, and many cross-curricular links can be made between English and many other subjects.